Hey, it's time for another non-review, and I'm not going to be doing one of my games this time. I had originally planned just to do my games, but since I'm actually in the middle of playing through this one again, I decided why not? Do it now instead of finishing the game and having to start a new one and record it then. So for that reason, the gameplay for this one's actually going to be from a pretty late level. And for a lot of people who probably don't know, this is a real-time strategy game, not real-time strategy. Turn-based strategy, like Fire Emblem. Only back in the PS1 days, really old games published by Atlas, which have done a bunch of other stuff. I think the only thing I know that they've done would be Shining Soul 2, which I played. That was Atlas, right? Because I know I'd seen them somewhere else. I know I've played at least one other game by them. But it's a really good game. And it's been years since I played it, and so long ago whenever was the last time that I played it, I don't even remember. I most likely did not understand the story, because looking at it now, it's got one of the best stories of most games around nowadays, so it's really good. Anyway, I'm going to do my best to give this game the respect it deserves, because it's great. And I hope you enjoyed the non-review. Kartia is a turn-based strategy game set in the world of Rebus. And here, most people anyway, have the ability to use Kartia for anything, because it's a card that can create anything. It mainly focuses on 4 elements: fire, water, wind, and earth, but it can also be used to do anything. It can create drinks, it can create food, they can even use it to create blood when they need to do surgery on someone who's wounded. So it has all uses, and most recently the ability to create phantoms, which are the beings born of Kartia, and there are 3 different kinds. People can use these phantoms for whatever they want. Specifically, large groups of phantoms are used in mines to dig and explore and find new Kartia or new text underground to be deciphered. Because every Kartia operates with a text, and you have to decipher and understand the text in order to fully use the Kartia. The story follows 2 different characters. Toxa Classico, he's a free knight who lives with a distant relative, Count Shinon, and Lacryma Christie, she's a shrine warrior, and one of the members of Vigilance, which is like a public service group of knights who go around and they defend people from thieves or rogue phantoms or whatever. And the game has 2 separate stories, and it follows both of those characters as the focus of their stories. However, both stories intertwine into one much larger and overall plot. Now this is done really well. Like, for example, Toxa's story, the first level in his story is episode 1, and then the second level is episode 3. Lacryma has episode 2, and it switches over like that for the most part. Like, not always does it go Toxa Lacryma if you want to play it in order, because episodes 4 and 5 are both in Lacryma's story, then 6 and 7 are both in Toxa's. But either way, each story has 18 levels, and it comes up to a total of 36. And if you play them all in order, the game's story makes much more sense, because you see this happening from one perspective in one story, and you see what the other characters are experiencing. The best example would be really early on in the game. There's a meeting between all the characters, and they're all split into 2 groups. If you're playing Toxa's story, you can see and listen to what Toxa's group was talking about, while in the background you see Lacryma's group talking to each other. Then when you play this in her story and pass that part, you'll actually be looking over there and listening to them while Toxa's group's in the background. So, it's just those kinds of things that are really well done. And I don't know how they came up with and how they managed to keep everything all in line, but it was really, really good. And the story actually starts off with them fighting against a group of thieves who are believed to be trying to kidnap Mona. she's a druid, and druids are the only ones who can raise world trees, which are the source of the best Kartia on Earth. I mean on Revis. World Tree Kartia. Of course, because that is so limited, they've come up with Silk and Mithril to kind of replace it. And they're kind of like non-renewable resources in today's day and age, because they said themselves that Silk and Mithril will eventually run out 100 years or something from now. And they don't see it as their problem, because it's so long-lasting to them. Anyway, for Toxa, he rescues Mona in the opening of his game after fighting off Misty, who is actually a member of Aqueldo. And for Lacryma, her story just begins with Kun joining their group. He's a trainee knight from another city called Vesta. Now, the main villains are all within the Rebels and Aqueldo. Aqueldo is this group of heathens. They're people who have used Kartia for their own personal gain, and they use it to destroy and basically do whatever they want. It's led by Raguruzet, Beltschumelt, I can't make these names up, and Saradiart. They're probably the three highest ranking in the group of Aqueldo, while the rebels, who are helping Aqueldo out, and vice versa, are led by Vandor. His daughters, Misty and Asti, and his loyal followers, Cross and Karis. And those are all basically the bad guys of the story. Although really early on, Misty basically becomes a good guy, and she becomes one of the few playable characters. Anyway, the story, it just proceeds really well, and there's much more I would like to talk about, but it's so much to just condense into a really short time. I'll move on to the gameplay for now. The game is turn-based strategy. It starts with your turn. You move all your characters, then it goes to the opponent's turn. Of course, with every level, you're given between 1 and 5 playable humans. There are only a few times when you have only 1 or 2 people. For the most part, you almost always have 4 and 5. And unlike other turn-based strategy games like Fire Emblem, here, if any people die, you game over. Because they're all important to the story, and they're all needed as the story goes on. So, you have to try your best not to lose anyone. Now, the brunt of your fighting force for the earlier missions comes from phantoms. And only set amount of characters, certain ones, can create phantoms. For Toxa's story, generally he and his ally Elena are the only ones who can create phantoms, and each of them can only create up to 6. So for the most part, the most characters you can be in control of is 17. 5 humans and 12 phantoms. At most. And in Lacryma's story, the people who have the ability to create phantoms are Boxdale and Troy. When it comes to your turn, you move all your characters around, and the phantoms operate in a rock, paper, scissors type manner. There are 3 different types of phantoms. Common phantoms, which are like, they look like normal creatures, and they're closest in mind to human, they're really smart. Dolls, which are literally puppets, and they look really skeletal. And then shadows, which are basically monsters, and every single shadow has 1 eye. They operate in the way that commons are superior to dolls, dolls are superior to shadows, and shadows are superior to commons. And it works in that circle. So if you have a common phantom, and it walks up to a doll phantom, it can do tremendous damage. And vice versa, if the doll tries to attack the common, it won't do any damage, and it'll take a really big beating from the common. There are also different types of phantoms. In addition to those classes, you start off with the Miles, the weakest type of phantom in the game. And as it goes on and you discover more text, you gain the ability to use more and more phantoms. In Lacryma's story, the enemy has a habit of being 1 phantom ahead of you. And by the time you get the text to create the phantom that they have, it would be sometime in that mission. For example, the enemy has the ability to create a type of phantom called a Lizaro. you don't have that yet. In the middle of that level, you will get text and the ability to create Lizara, while in Tox's story, you're almost always up to date with your opponents. I only fell behind when we got to the Dragon Phantoms. They had Dragon Phantoms, and I couldn't create them yet, but I was able to create them in the middle. Anyway, there are about 16 types of Phantoms, I'm gonna say, and each is superior to the last. So back to this common beats doll. If you have a common Miles, and you have him attack a doll B-head, he won't do as much damage as if he was a common Miles attacking a common B-head. I mean a doll Miles. Because the types are more advanced, their stats are generally better, so even if they are the weaker type of Phantom, they're still a class ahead. If you can understand that. That's not to say that you can't beat a doll B-head with a few common Miles, but it just won't be as easy as beating a doll Miles with a single common Miles. The people also become much stronger as the game progresses, the maximum level being 20, and the higher level they get, the stronger they become. Plain and simple. And of course, events in the story actually make some characters much more useful than others. For example, really early on, Pasha, one of the characters who is a regular in Tox's story, is really weak. But as she grows levels, she gets stronger, and really far into the game, she's promoted to Shrine Warrior through a story event. And as the game continues, she has an increased movement range and her stats are much better. This is also applied to a few other characters. Another aspect of the gameplay that's really handy and you really have to know when you're facing much larger amounts of enemies, because as I said, the most you can have at any one time is 17, while enemies, they won't be, you can fight like 40 of them. And out of those 40, they might have 30 Phantoms and 10 human enemies. And human enemies get continually tougher to kill, even for your people if they're at level 20. So what you need to know is how to use magic. If you select an opponent, you can look at their status sheet and see what magic they have the least resistance to, and then you can use that on them. The 4 classes of magic are Fire, Air, Water, and Earth. And each class has 2 different, like, subclasses. They have Fire for a single target and Fire for a wide range of targets. So Fire for a single target is, you use a fire spell, it can be a weak one, a strong one, on a single person, while the wide range one reaches farther and can hit more people. And as you go on, you can use these much better to take out multiple Phantoms, or weaken multiple people so that you can kill them off easier. Of course, the enemies can do this too, and they won't hesitate to whip out as many spells as they can and wipe out all your Phantoms. They do that to me all the time, and it's really annoying. So the gameplay is simple at most. You have your people, you make them use magic to weaken enemies, and you have your Phantoms finish them off, or you have the Phantoms weaken the enemies and then your people finish them off. Whatever you prefer. Either way, everyone's going to reach level 20 by the end. It's almost guaranteed, unless you actually don't use a character for the sake of not wanting to use them, for whatever reason. Another slightly unexplored part of the gameplay is weapon creation. Just like you can create anything with Kartia, you can create weapons and armor with Kartia. Of course, you need the text also, so as the game progresses, you get the ability to make better weapons at any time you want. And you have to remember to do this, because the game will not give you enough weapons and enough good weapons to arm all your people. You have to create the weapons yourself. And when you create weapons, Phantoms, or you're casting spells, you can add on additional Kartia. For example, Fire Spell can use 2 Kartia. It has 2 that create that Fire Spell. But it has a 3rd slot depending on how skilled your people are. For example, Troy, from the get-go, he can add on 1 Kartia to any of his spells, and it'll make them stronger. It can even change the spell into a later spell. The same can be done with Phantoms. You can increase the level of weapon they can hold from D to C if you give them certain text. You can increase their movement ranges, their elemental resists, and so on and so forth with additional Kartia when you're creating them. With weapons, you can make them much stronger. You can make armor lighter so that it doesn't slow you down as much, and so on. So the Kartia system, while really simple, it can be used to do practically everything, and it must be used and taken advantage of so that you're not always under the thumb of your opponents and they're not always superior to you despite the fact that they are really strong. Now on to music. This game actually, I didn't really appreciate the music much when I was young because, well, I don't want to say when I was young because I don't know when it was I played the game last, but playing it now, the music is much better than I remembered, and I just love it. All of it. All the fighting themes, all the casual themes in the middle during the conversations, and all the more serious themes when you meet up with big bad guys like Sorority Art are all really good. And the music's it's well done, and you'll enjoy it if you notice it, and if you don't, that's fine. But I'm just saying, you'll be missing out because the music is well done for this kind of game, and I didn't expect that when I came back to it. But from the opening of the game, the opening cinematic, you can tell that the music, it has a really good theme. So at the end of the day, once again, fun is the most important part of any of my non-reviews, and Kartia, it can be fun, but it can be frustrating. Just like Fire Emblem, or any other turn-based strategy game that you might try out. Because believe it or not, it's been forever since I played it, and I just gained over 3 times lately when I was in the later levels. Not even the later levels, just in the middle of it, I left my character somewhere. Reinforcements come at the beginning of enemy turns, which means they can move when they arrive. So I left a single character in the range of like 6 phantoms, and they just went to town on him and killed him. And the same thing later on, once again. Never underestimate your opponents, because they'll just whip out a spell on you that you don't have access to. They did that to me before. I had all my people gathered in one place, these enemy soldiers came out, they killed them all. They killed all my phantoms and they killed another of my people, and I gamed over. So, the game can be surprisingly tough on you if you let it. Like if you forget a little bit of something, or if you underestimate your opponents and think they can't do anything to me, it might fill that spot and make you feel like, I should have not done that, But at the end, it's still a fun game. Challenging from time to time, yes, but a lot of fun. One last thing I wanted to mention, aside from the really great story, the fun and somewhat complex yet simple gameplay, and the really good music, is the game has one slight glitch in it. Like I said, there are 16 types of phantoms. The strongest phantom in the game is called the Fynus. And due to what many people believe to be a glitch, or maybe something that was forgotten in development, it's almost impossible for you to actually gain the ability to create Fynus. The only way someone suggested you can do it is using a Game Shark to hack the game and give you the ability to do it, or when you're creating a phantom, give it certain Kartia to add on to it that'll turn it into a Fynus. I don't know how to do that, and I don't have a Game Shark, so I still never got the ability to use Fynus. And this is kind of irritating, as Fynus are superior to any phantom. Even the dragons, which are the phantoms before them. And in both final levels for Tox and Lacryma, the opponents only have Fynus phantoms. Of course, you can easily get around this if you manage to create the Earth spell Corequake, which does a great amount of damage to them. So anyway, that's the one kind of glaring issue, but you can work around it multiple ways. That's in Kartia. And at the end, it's a really well done turn-based strategy game, and it's worth your time if you manage to find it. I wouldn't know where to look considering how old it is, but it's a fun game. That was Kartia, and like I said, in addition to being a really fun game and being really good, the music's awesome. Like, maybe I remembered back then how good it was, but seeing it now again, I'm like, yeah, it's really well done. And it's just, something more I can say about it that I already said. That was a good game. Anyway, my next non-review will probably be on Final Fantasy 7, or I'll actually go do Path of Radiance. I don't know when this is gonna happen though, because it's been kind of a mess. I've been wanting to get footage for Path of Radiance, but that didn't work out. And I decided, well, I'm playing this right now, I'll just do this, and maybe I'll go back to Path of Radiance later. Either way, I'll do something sooner, and it won't be as long a break as it was to do this one. Definitely not. So until next time.